Hello, travelers! Have you ever been playing last Epoch and gotten hit by a stray hit at like 700 corruption and then boom, your character's dead? Well, I have the build for you. This build will make you truly feel immortal. This is the Immortal Gladiator. It's a forge card based around the passive node, Forge Master's Might. Forge Master's Might allows you to equip both a spear and a shield at the same time, enabling a significant amount of tankiness for traditionally two-handed weapon builds. It also allows us to combine our two-handed weapon Titan Heart, which gives us 15% less damage taken while wielding a two-handed melee weapon, alongside a shield, which normally doesn't happen, enabling an insane amount of tankiness, both from the less damage taken and from the 100% block chance that we have. This build is insanely powerful. The beauty lies in the line of text. 9% more vengeance damage for every 10% block chance. So while most other builds struggle to get past 90% block chance to get that full cap of 100%, this build easily clears it, going up to 180 or even 230% block chance. There are a couple must-haves in order to play this build. First is Phalanx. It's the spear that enables this build. It has the line of text 9% more damage with vengeance per 10% block chance. And second is Onslaught of Serrata. Past that, there are a ton of best in slot items. These include Titan Heart, as previously mentioned, Shattered Chains, which gives us 20% more melee damage, Siphon of Anguish, which enables Shattered Chains, Orion's Sun Seal, which is giving us additions to Symbol of Hope that are much needed in order to cap our block chance, and Army of Skin, which gives us the attack speed that we so desperately desire due to the nerf from Forge Master's Might that reduces our attack speed. So those are essentially the best in slot required items. But there are some items in my build that are best in slot still that are not required, that are a little bit harder to get. One of them being Immortal Vice. This is probably the best in slot item that isn't required, which is an Eternal Gauntlet base that gives you access to damage deferment from 25% hit damage taken from boss and enemies dealt over 4 seconds, and an implicit of a tier 6 or tier 7 melee attack speed. Plus slamming another tier 7 melee attack speed on there, you're getting a ton of melee attack speed from these gloves. So let's talk about the build a little bit in more detail. Let's talk about Vengeance. Vengeance has a ton of more multipliers. 50% from Vengeful Fighter, another 50% from Executioner, 10% from Disarming Strike, and another 60% from Fiery Frenzy. All the more multipliers are insane, but we're also turning the skill into a fire skill with Flaming Sword, and getting a ton of damage reduction from our additional riposte and bolster, which is giving us an additional 26% damage reduction. We're using Forward Strike to enable our vengeance with reinforced weapons, giving us 12% more global damage, and Fan the Flames, which, remember, we turned our vengeance into a fire skill so that we can have 30% global fire penalty. Fire, additionally, is an elemental attack, which means it takes reduced effectiveness from armor mitigation, so we are therefore doing more damage than we were if we were just doing physical damage. In addition, we're running Ring of Shields, which is giving us 15% flat fire damage to our skills, and increased fire melee damage by 90%. Healing Hands, of course, is our healing skill that's applying on our vengeance whenever we use Cleric's Hammer, which is auto-casting our Healing Hands based on our melee hit, and we're essentially just using it as a fire hit that is healing us. This is our only source of sustain, really, but it's enough for the build because I'm at 1000 corruption and I can tank anything. Symbols of Hope is really the gas behind the build because it's giving us an additional 15% block chance. With Tetragram and Polygram, we get up to 5 symbols, enabling that, plus an additional 125% damage amp and 100% increased crit chance. So there's a lot of power in symbols. We can use the additional, 3 points in symbols to get Decree of Flame, just to get 3 points of flat fire damage per symbol. That's another 15 flat damage, but you would need a lot of points to get there. So that's our skills. Let's talk about passives. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. You want anything that says block chance. So Stalwart, we want it. Time and Faith is pretty important because it's giving us essentially percent max health whenever we use Vengeance. So there you go. In Paladin, we want Honor, and then we want to put the remainder of our points into Defiance and Conviction. We want 3 points in Honor to get the flat block chance, and then we want enough points in the tree in order to get Symbols of Hope and Healing Hands. Void Knight, we care about Dark Maw. Dark Maw gives us 10% increased health. Percent increased health is hard to come by as a Forge Guard. There's not that much in the tree, so an additional 10% is pretty handy. And Void Corruption is giving us 1% crit multiplier per point in the Void Knight tree. Since we have 20 points in the Void Knight tree, we have 20% crit multiplier. So pretty powerful. Those two are what we care about. Otherwise, anything to get there. Forge Guard, 3 points into Steel Aegis to get that 3% block chance. Then we care about 5 points into Weapon Mastery for the 5% base critical strike chance with the spear. And Champion of the Forge, which gives us 1% crit multiplier per 2 strength once we put 5 points in. We also really want Smelter Smite because by converting Vengeance into a fire skill, we are turning the bleed chance into ignite chance, and it gets doubled from this node with Smelter Smite. So we want to get 15 stacks of ignite in order to max out our more fire damage from Vengeance. Then we have 12% increased health from Might, increased crit chance from Duelist, increased crit multi from lethal strikes, and more importantly, fire penetration per 5 strength. So we want a strength stack additionally. Then we have Flawless Defender for armor with the shield. Walls of Solarum, we pass the 50% block chance, so we get 10% less damage taken. And then super importantly, Shield Crafter to enable our Ring of Shields to be auto cast. Otherwise, it's on a 15-second cooldown, and we don't get the uptime from the block chance, which turns into damage jam for a Vengeance. So we want this in order to keep the uptime of Ring of Shields. Of course, Forge Master's Might is required in order to play the build, so you put a point there, and then any remaining points can go into Master of Arms. You will notice with this build that we don't have reduced bonus damage taken from critical hits with the shield. And that is because, I mean, we have it, but we don't have a lot of it because we have so much tankiness that any hit is pretty much mitigated. We don't die from hits. The only thing that we're dying from is damage over time, and we have a ton of armor to make up for that from Immortal Vice. So if you look, our base armor is 5,500. When we use our Forge Strike, our armor goes up to 7,000, right? And then when we use our Vengeance in addition, we're going to 7,800. So we have a ton of armor built into our build, and the more strength we can get, the more our armor increases. So we also want a dual strength max. Super importantly, while going back to gear for a little bit, you want to get a Phalanx with melee attack speed at tier 7, and additionally, melee fire damage, because Phalanx doesn't have a bunch of flat damage, and since there's so many more multipliers built into Phalanx, we also need some flat damage. So a tier 6 melee fire damage alongside my tier 7 melee attack speed is the way I want it to go. On my 3LP, I missed the slam, and I just don't have another one, so it's what I'm running with for now. So I'm missing like 30 to 40% of my damage, purely because I missed the tier 6 melee fire damage slam. You can run a Leonines instead of the Peak of the Mountain. It'll make you insanely tanky. It gives a good amount of flat armor alongside the fact that you can't get crit, which is fine. But more importantly, it enables you to leech from your crits again, and you have leech from your Siphon of Anguish, so there you go. Otherwise, Nihilus is pretty good. I also like Evolution's End because in both cases you want the +2 to all skills. And if you really don't care about the +2 for all skills for some reason, Apostate Sanctuary can give you 14% more damage and some more health from your Vitality. So another good option there. The only required idol is Throne of Ambition. It gives you 40% more damage from fire. And the best in slot idols are increased health with increased block effectiveness as the suffix. So fill your idols up with those. And then for blessings, we just want 8% block chance. The armor, wherever possible, 20% all res, crit multiplier, and super importantly, chance to gain ward when hit. Because we gain the ward, we don't have ward retention, but it doesn't matter at low amounts of ward, which we have. And immediately we get hit again, which consumes that ward and generates more ward, right? So it's essentially healing us 30 whenever we take a hit. Cool. Thanks everybody. Check out my build guide below if you want a little bit more information on the build, and hope you guys are having a great time playing Last Epoch. Good luck. See y'all later.